Hi everyone, my name is Sydney Chambers, and today I'm going to be talking about my data analytics project. And I wanted to ask the question, does patient satisfaction and timeliness of care affect financial performance? Brief introduction. I wanted to explore the relationship between patient satisfaction and timeliness of care and how those variables affected financial performance. And I used the hospital 2017 data set to explore these variables, and all except one of the financial variables that I used were adjusted by the demographic variable patient days for both the univariate and bivariate analysis. The two hypotheses that I'm going to be talking about today are the first being the greater the total salaries of staff for a hospital means the staff responsiveness rating will be higher. And second, the greater the total hourly rate means there will be less patients who developed a blood clot while in the hospital who did not get treatment that could have prevented it. So for the exploring section, I conducted both a univariate and bivariate analysis of each of the variables that I chose specifically for the hypotheses that I'm going to be talking about today. The first hypothesis, I conducted a univariate analysis of adjusted total salaries and a univariate analysis of staff responsiveness ratings and a bivariate analysis of those two variables. And for the second hypothesis, I conducted a univariate analysis of total hourly rate, which is the financial variable, and the a univariate analysis of the QT VTE6 variable, the patients who developed blood clots, and a bivariate analysis of those two variables. So this first univariate analysis adjusted total salaries. Again, I adjusted this financial variable by patient days. This first graph right here is with outliers, definitely a lot of outliers. The second here being the one without outliers, I cut the outliers off at 19,000 because obviously this is a very high maximum, and the average for adjusted total salaries is 3,300. The next univariate analysis I'm going to be discussing is staff responsiveness. So these ratings are based off of 0 to 100. And this graph, I didn't have to cut out any outliers. There is an obvious cluster around the middle here, about from 75 to 97. This the average for this variable is 85. Now, this univariate analysis for total hourly rate, this graph right here is with outliers, and then this graph is without outliers. I believe I cut the outliers out at 90 or 95, and the average for total hourly rate is 5,086. And then this is the univariate analysis of the blood clot patients. This graph is the one with outliers. This graph is the one without outliers. This, sorry, the average patients that developed a blood clot while in the hospital is about 2. Still a low amount of patients that developed a blood clot while in the hospital, but it could be different for other hospitals, smaller, larger hospitals. Next is the bivariate analysis. This is a bivariate analysis with adjusted total salaries and staff responsiveness ratings. This graph indicates that the correlation between the two variables is positive, as you can see by the positive regression line right here. I believe I adjusted this staff responsiveness rating to cut off at 60 because that's where most of the outliers were. And as you can see, as total salaries are increasing, staff responsiveness rating also goes up. And then for the bivariate analysis for total hourly rate and the blood clot patients, this graph is slightly negative as indicated by the regression line right here. The regression line is pointing downwards, so this means that as total hourly rate is increasing, that there are less patients who developed a blood clot. And from this, I developed the two hypotheses that I mentioned previously. The independent variables that were tested were total salaries and total hourly rate. Again, total salaries were adjusted by patient days, but total hourly rate was not. The dependent variables that were tested were staff responsiveness rating and the blood clot patients. And the control variables that I used were bed size, Medicare patient days, Medicaid patient days, accreditation, CBSA, region, and owner. The region variables that were not included in this testing section were Southeast and United Kingdom, and the CBSA variable that was not being tested is Metro. Now here's the linear regression for adjusted total salaries and staff responsiveness. Based on the test that I conducted, my hypothesis is accurate. There is a statistical relationship between staff responsiveness and total salaries as indicated by this p-value right here. It's below 0.005. And as the staff responsiveness rating increases by 1, the hospital is gaining approximately $144.70 in adjusted total salaries per year. This means that my hypothesis should be accepted, and according to the regression, staff responsiveness rating is correlated to the finances of a hospital. And this next linear regression is total hourly rate and the blood clot patients. And based on this test, my hypothesis is accurate. There is a correlation between the two variables as indicated by the p-value that is less than 0.005. As the number of patients who developed a blood clot while in the hospital who did not get treatment that could have prevented it, the hospital is losing 25 cents in total hourly rates, which in theory is not that much, but there are still less as total hourly rate increases. As total hourly rate increases, there are still less patients that develop a blood clot in the hospital. And for the confirming section, I was able to accept 3 of my 4 hypotheses. The hypotheses that I was able to accept were the greater the total liabilities of a hospital means the hospital rating will be higher. The greater the total hourly rate means there will be less patients who developed a blood clot while in the hospital who did not get treatment for it that could have prevented it. And the greater the total salaries of staff for a hospital means the staff responsiveness rating will be higher. The only hypothesis that I had to reject was the greater the fixed assets of a hospital means the hospital rating will be higher. And next in the confirming section, for my first hypothesis, it obviously was accepted. And in doing this, I created a policy that I think hospitals should follow. The policy is that hospitals that receive higher staff responsiveness ratings will receive a 5% increase in total salaries over the course of a year. In the experiment, we should classify hospitals by the highest and lowest staff responsiveness rating, and we can look at the total salaries based on those ratings. We can analyze how much is a certain staff member making and how is that affecting the responsiveness of our staff, like how are people rating how timely our staff is. Um, and then we should take 100 hospitals with the highest staff responsiveness ratings and then 100 hospitals with the lowest staff responsiveness ratings and compare those ratings with the adjusted total salaries of the hospital or the total salaries of that hospital. And then for my second hypothesis, again, it can be supported. So a policy that I came up with, hospitals that have less patients who developed a blood clot while in the hospital who did not get treatment that could have prevented it will receive a 3% increase in their total hourly rate. And then for the experiment, we should classify hospitals by the total hourly rate of their staff and compare it to the number of blood clot patients, and just to measure and see how many patients that were not treated for a blood clot that they had. And then we should take 1,000 of those hospitals from the random sample and analyze those numbers to the total hourly rate of those hospitals. In conclusion, my experiment should be carried out because there is an evident relationship between patient satisfaction, timeliness of care, and finances of hospitals. After analyzing my hypotheses, hospitals should start conducting the same experiments to determine if their hospitals have relationships between patient satisfaction, timeliness of care, and finances, and whether the experiments are positive or negative over the course of however long the experiments go. The hospital should do so in order to reevaluate their policies, their guidelines, what they should do to have positive effects, not only on their finances, but also on their patient satisfaction and timeliness of care variables and how those work in their organization. So that's it. And if you guys have any questions, please just post them in the forum. And yeah.